Ukraine is leading the world in tactical drone technology. But it's not just tactics and innovations that they are pioneering. They've also created some amazing homegrown drone tech. We've covered the early trials of Ukraine's ground combat vehicle, and now we're going to see as it's being deployed into the battlefield. Let's take a look at what roles the D-2111 has for Ukraine. Okay, so you guys know that we've talked about this vehicle actually pretty extensively on this channel. We covered the initial sort of trials where they just sent out some footage where it was just moving autonomously across fields, place to place, kind of behind the lines. And then we had some of their very early trial combat missions. And then now we're seeing an extensive deployment plan for this D-21. And one of the things you guys got to understand about this kind of system is that under the pressure of combat, Ukraine can't wait to innovate. It's got to put stuff out into the battlefield quickly and double down on what works.
As everyone knows, drones have become an essential part of the war between Russia and Ukraine. But up until this point, most drone systems in action are in the air, so flying. However, in the past years, a lot of time, money, and effort has been put into the development of ground-based systems. And today, that is exactly what we will see. It's called D-2111. It was developed and manufactured locally here in Ukraine, and the producers feel that it's ready to be actually put into action. The D-2111 can do many things. If you put a machine gun on it, it's basically a killer robot. If you take the machine gun off, it can be used to evacuate dead or wounded soldiers, and also to bring supplies, ammunition, water, food, whatever, to the guys in the first lines in the trenches.
Now, this is some of those non-combat roles are actually more important, I would argue. The reason is because each one of those events is a really, really vulnerable time, right? We've seen in other reporting actually from United 24, in fact, from this reporter, if I remember correctly, where the process of getting troops to those frontline trenches often involves driving across open fields, dangerous roads, in often an unarmored van, and then they have to quickly basically throw cases of water, pallets of rations, butane burners, ammunition, all of it, literally throw it out of the van as fast as possible, get it into the entrenched positions, and then load back up in the van and get out as fast as possible, because the Russian drones are always watching, and they're going to watch those main roadways. And that sort of resupply system, it's continuous, right? Soldiers need new supplies every 72 hours. So if you know where there's a Ukrainian position, the Russians just have to simply watch the road approaches to those positions, and they know that they can interdict those supplies with drones and other attacks. And that results in casualties and a large number of destroyed material, in part because you have to do it by the van load, right? If you're going to take the risk, the thinking is you're going to risk it for a large supply run, right? Fewer large supply runs are more worth it. Like the losses if they get destroyed is greater. Does that make sense? So if the Russians take out that van, the Ukrainian soldiers in that trench might go a week before a resupply is attempted again, right? Now, the appeal of a drone is severalfold. First, the drone doesn't need headlights. It's GPS guided, so it can operate at night. Second, because it can haul smaller amounts continuously, right? It's not a human being. It could run supply runs for 12 hours straight. Each individual supply run doesn't risk soldiers' lives, and each individual supply run is less valuable, right? It's also just a smaller target, harder to hit. There's a lot of advantages. Similarly, medevacs, even in the Afghan war, it was classic. We were trained that the insurgent forces would routinely plant an IED to produce casualties, and then would have secondary IEDs in place just to target the soldiers that came out to aid the wounded trooper. So if there is a vehicle that can recover autonomously a wounded soldier, remember, a lot of soldiers, they're wounded, but they're awake. They can oftentimes move or crawl with some level of mobility. So if it's just a case of crawling themselves onto a litter or stretcher, right, now there's no additional risk to doing a battlefield recovery, right? You might remember during the counteroffensive, there was a viral video in which a Ukrainian soldier was wounded in a minefield, right, getting out of a Bradley, I think it was. And then his buddy tries to recover him. His buddy gets wounded. Then a third soldier tries to recover the two wounded soldiers, and they are wounded. And finally, the Bradley commander has to say, no more soldiers attempt recovery. They roll up and get out, leaving the wounded behind. It was a total disaster. And this vehicle would reduce that, right? If they had a vehicle like this, they would not have taken those additional 3 casualties. They would have had just the 1 casualty, and he would have had a chance to be recovered by a drone, not by a fellow soldier risking their life.
So today, the developers will introduce their drone, show what it can, what it can't do to a brigade of the Ukrainian army, the 3rd Separate Assault Brigade. And after that, one of the drones will be presented to them, and they will take it into war.
Like with every new system, understanding it.
Okay, YouTube censors. This is directed at you guys. YouTube censors, please don't. This is all, as he just said, it's training events. I'm going to censor all the combat. So don't demonetize me. Please don't demonetize me. And guys, if you're interested in seeing the uncensored, actual, no cap combat footage, those videos, that analysis, right, that's hosted on combatvetnews.com for members. It's the best way to support the channel because YouTube always cracking down on war content, especially in an election year. It's kind of weird. So if you're interested in supporting what I do, the reporting I do, the analysis I do, any one of these tiers will get you access to the twice weekly uncensored combat video analysis. We take footage from primarily Ukraine, but all across the battlefields of the world, and we analyze the tactics. We look at the footage, and it's uncensored. So we get some raw stuff. Oftentimes, it's as little as 24 hours old sometimes. So if you're interested in supporting the channel, check it out, combatvetnews.com. Anyway, thanks to everybody that supports us over there. It really, it makes a huge difference.
And learning how to use it is essential before deploying it in a combat environment where any mistake can have huge consequences, from losing the robot in the best case to losing human lives in the worst.
Because remember, guys, there are some other problems. When you have any systems like this, you've got to understand what it can and can't do, but also you have to understand how you can employ it. My first thoughts when I look at a vehicle like this is that it could lure or broadcast the location of Ukrainian troops, right? It could broadcast supply depots. There could also be ways that the signal could be interdicted or intercepted that would allow Russia to track it, right? So there's a lot of things you should understand before you operate it.
Нижня, задня нижня, задня верхня і передня верхня.
Пробіл, який дає стрільбу чергами. Все, ми насипаємо. Те саме можна зробити і тут. Натискаємо до гачка.
God bless it. One of the things that I love and never gets old for me is the fact that you have video game controllers, right? Video game controllers famously used by a ton of people that want this kind of simple, innovative a control scheme, right? Notably, U.S. submarines adopted I think it was an Xbox controller for control, right? Let's see, for control, I think it's the Con Tower. Yeah, here we go. U.S. Navy swapping $38,000 Periscope joysticks for $30 Xbox controllers on high-tech submarines. This was from 2017, and the reason is simple. The Xbox controller is actually perfect, right? Because it's designed, right, for precision movement and intuitive precision movement, right? If you can get a headshot on some other goober on Fortnite with it, it's good enough for almost any level of military precision, right? And best of all, a huge portion of the young sailors already know how to use it. That's, I think, a huge appeal, right? Men, I mean, the rate at which men play video games, or young boys, right? Like, I wonder what percent of boys play video games. Let's see. So, oh my God. In 2008, 99% of boys played video games. Other studies found 93% of boys played video games. 80% of boys 13 to 15 play video games in one study. Younger boys more likely to play than older boys. Gaming can be a top interest for boys 8 to 15. Right? What percentage of males play video games? It says 53% of males are gamers. 52% of gamers subscribe to at least one gaming service. It's more than that, right? 4 years ago, why do 92% of teenage boys play video games? Right? And so more than 90% of children over 2 play video games. 3/4 of American households have a video game console. I think that's... So basically, it's fair to say that if you see a man in his 20s, there is something like a 90% chance he has spent at least some period of time behind a controller like this. So why mess with what's not working? Why mess with...
Знімаємо запобіжник і починаємо стріляти.
стрільби, високо стоїть з чим? Скільки кулемет може, стільки і стріляє. Тут якби питання в тому, як ми налаштуємо. В процесі пристрілки ми налаштовуємо режими стрільби, там у нас...
1, 3, 5, 10 is the burst rate. A one round, pop. A 3, pop, pop, pop. 5, pop, 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 pop. And a 10 is da-da-da-da, da-da-da-da, da-da-da-da. It's single shot, what we would call sustained, cyclic, and rapid fire rates. They're doctrinally different. They're meant for different things.
1, 3, 5, 10.
The system can be reworked from a transport mechanism to a deadly weapon in only a few minutes. The adjustments can be done directly on the front line.
Є. Вкидається він, в принципі, от сюди в направляйку і одразу фіксується. Все.
Пробуємо.
Давай. Есть, в правый попал.
So it took them just a couple of minutes to mount the machine gun on the chassis, and it really feels like something from the movies of my childhood has come true. Terminator or Matrix. The time of the killer robots has come for sure.
The advantages are clear. Where you would otherwise need a human to pull the trigger, the machine gunner can now assault the enemy remotely.
This is absolutely potentially game-changing. Imagine, because right now, if you wanted to conduct a flanking maneuver, right, you'd have a base of fire, and then you have flanks. But let's say you were to sit there and go, okay, it could literally change tactics. You could literally make contact with the enemy on an assault, and then suddenly flank from directions that the enemy doesn't expect you. They go, this field is mined, or there's no way they're going to flank us across an open field. But you get a drone, particularly an armored one like this, right? Like, what are small arms going to even do to this? Not much of anything, right? Unless you nail this tiny lens of a camera, right? This thing, it can go out, it can flank, it can deliver fire from different directions. So this can perform the flanking maneuver and allow... You would have to sort of do a little bit of a switcheroo. So you'd have to say, okay, human beings establish a base of fire, 2 drones flank and become static machine gun positions. Now they're the base of fire, and the human element begins the assault. It would be a really game-changing innovation and would enable even small units to conduct robust assaults.
But while assaulting is undoubtedly the most...
Oh, don't need to see this. Gotta write down the time so that I can edit this out later, or censor it later, so that YouTube doesn't demonetize me. Thanks.
Most dangerous task. A close second is getting to and from positions, even if they are under Ukrainian control. Russian FPV, artillery, and more...
This is a compilation of dash cams of Ukrainian troops getting hit with artillery FPV drones as they drive across roads.
Mortar units are always
looks exactly like the dash cams that used to show IED strikes.
Looking for troops on rotation when they have to leave cover and move through the open. Unmanned ground vehicles like the D-2111 are supposed to ease all these tasks, from assisting assault units by providing fire support to bringing supplies, or by serving as an off-road taxi.
Okay, this does not look like that helpful. We've seen, for example, this looks just like the golf carts the Russians are using as part of their assault, right? To cover roadways and other sort of rear lines rapidly to prevent drones from detecting and then striking them, to make it harder for artillery to dial in locations. Speed is the best defense. And that's true, but there's not really a special innovation having troops on here. I don't see the troops as being a game changer because the appeal is the things you can do while risking no lives, right? But risking 4 versus having a driver, like if one of these guys drove it, it's just a golf cart.
А насколько ее хватает?
15 кілометрів проїжджав. Зимою 15, влітку 20 десь. На одній.
По времени.
Ну,
Скільки ви будеш їхати? З якої?
як, їздили по пересічній місцевості, і це по часу зайняло практично світовий день. Зранку до вечора, тобто ми її не розрядили за день.
To be honest, it feels a little bit like something rich people would invent so they don't have to walk anywhere. It has headlights, brake lights, indicator, this bar to hold on to. But if someone's shooting at you or things are exploding around you or you're just tired because you haven't slept in 3 days, then you're probably really grateful that this thing can...
I look at this and I don't think this is that effective for a like physically capable ambulatory troops. But if, let's say, we've seen a lot of leg wounds, because remember, body armor is covering the upper body here, to sit there and be like, yo, 3 guys, we have 3 casualties, all with tourniqueted legs. Instead of needing a buddy to limp them out, they just get loaded onto this. All they need is to be able to grip this, and then they get ferried out, right? A medevac vehicle, this thing would be awesome.
and take you where you need to go. So it's quite a nifty creation, to be honest.
Commanders like Jorik are hoping to save lives and manpower with these machines, a resource that has become increasingly scarce as the war in Ukraine progresses.
First of all, we need logistics, and we want to minimize human loss so that robots
Right. One of the things that he's not kidding, logistics are a game changer. And we've talked about this, that the part of the surge of aid to Ukraine, part of the challenge is that it's got to get to these guys in the trenches. And you see that at every phase, the Russians are trying to interdict it, right? So they're trying to hit it in warehouses deep in the Ukrainian, in urban areas, like in Lviv, right? Hitting them with long-range missiles and glide bombs. They're trying to hit them in sort of forward support areas with artillery or more like thermobaric systems and even some of their Shahed drones. They're trying to hit them, again, on the roads as they drive into the trenches. So being able to make the logistics harder to interdict, which sometimes it means taking very concentrated targets, which are appealing, and dispersing them. Again, depending on the cost of this drone, if you could get the logistics, the cost of delivering, instead of doing one van run or one run with a 5-ton, you sit there and go, okay, it's going to be 50 runs with this drone, but you're just going to change the battery. It's going to do a 7-kilometer round trip, and it just gets in, change the battery, put it on the charger, load up another pallet and send it off. It can run, instead of doing one run a week, for example, you say, hey, it runs for 12 hours straight. And then, so that way, if it gets interdicted, the losses are lesser.
fight, not people. It saved many lives, so it has the right to be on the battlefield to continue developing.
With unfolded seats, the D-2111 can transport a heavily wounded soldier to safety.
YouTube censors. This is an example. There's clearly no wounds on this man.
A task that would usually require 4 men. That often means leaving and giving up a position. With a robot like this, Not only can the remaining soldiers stay at the front lines, but the robot can even bring a healthy soldier as a substitute before evacuating the wounded.
Тобто ти їдеш отак, якщо людина їде передом, не бачить яму, він падає, він провалюється в яму, і ти отак от вилітаєш головою прямо в це.
Чуть-чуть можеш себе підстрахувати там, типу.
А так ти вперся в це і як би лежиш.
UGVs are just starting to be used in large numbers. But with the war becoming ever more deadly, robots like the D-2111 are set to provide some much-needed relief for the armed forces of Ukraine, where many soldiers are now well into their third year of war.
Right. This is the thing, guys. Anytime in medicine, they sometimes call it operating at the top of your license, and it's a concept that is essential in scaling a system, right? If you're a soldier, there are some things that a robot just cannot do, right? It can't distinguish friend from enemy. It can't reliably engage in complex tactics like a flank or a suppress and fire and maneuver. It can't communicate with other soldiers to perform like trench clearing, to size up a situation and move through, right? There's some things that only a human can do. And the idea is that you take the humans you have and you focus them onto the things that only they can do. Diagnose and repair mechanical issues, change an engine in a striker or a main battle tank, right? Fix a track. Treat someone who's wounded, right? Provide medical care. And so you have to look at all the other tasks that can be automated, and you have to automate them. This is something that any tech innovator, tech bro, tech founder is going to tell you, that at some point they sat there and said, listen, we have 50 people and we have 200 people's worth of work. So we need to bring in tools that enable us to be really, really efficient and automate everything. And so that is sort of the perspective that Ukraine is bringing to this. They're treating war like a tech company. And we know in the West that we spent 20 years losing the war in Afghanistan, at least here in the United States. In those same 20 years, we produced some of the greatest technological innovations in human history, right? We've used technology to connect people and things and ideas that would have been science fiction 30 years ago. So that mentality, I think, needs to be brought into the military sphere, and Ukraine seems to be doing it. Anyway, guys, that is all I had. Be sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel if you enjoy this type of content, right? It helps tell me, it helps tell the algorithm that what I'm making is good, important content. And of course, a huge thank you to our Colonel tier members and our Lieutenant tier members, all of you guys on Combat Vet News. I couldn't do it without you guys. Thank you so much, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.